Good evening. Thank you for coming. Can you hear me in the back? Professor Falsey, can you hear me?
Yeah. Not really. Not really.
Could be louder.
Could be a little louder.
Yeah, there's an issue with the mic. And so we'll ask the readers to read loudly. And someone will be coming in to adjust it at 7 o'clock. Anyway, good evening. Good evening, and thank you for coming. And let me welcome you to the final event of the 2011-2012 Holloway Poetry Series. I'm Cecil Giscombe. I'm one of the curators of the series. And I would like to take this moment to thank my co-curator, Rosa Martinez, for both her hard work this year on the series and for the steady pleasure of her conversation through all of our late-night telephone calls. Please, a round of applause for Rosa Martinez. And before I forget, let me tell you that the Holloway series of readings will resume in the fall. In the fall, we're going to be emphasizing British and Irish writers, and visitors to the series will include David Marriott, John Wilkinson, Keston Sutherland, Kathleen, Jamie, and one or two other writers. On the 16th and 17th of November of this year, the Poetics Without Closure, a symposium involving several of the visitors, will be put on by the Holloway series. And in the fall as well, we will welcome the Irish poet Kathleen Walsh to campus as the fall 2012 Holloway Poet in Residence. Tonight we're going to hear some other poets. We welcome Ron Silliman back to Berkeley. Ron Silliman will be introduced by Claire Marie Stanchek, and we'll also be hearing our own Jill Roberts, who will be introduced by the Holloway postdoc fellow Chris Chen. At this moment, I'm going to ask Chris Chen to come to the podium and get us underway. Thank you very much.
Joe Richards. And this is actually not an introduction by me. My name is David Brazil. I'm a writer and scholar resident in the Bay Area. I've been asked to introduce Joe Richards, and I'm pleased to do so. I'm not, however, speaking to you right now, because I work on Tuesday nights. So this text is being read to you on my behalf, possibly by Chris Chen. Hello, Chris. Jill and I have known one another for years, and most of our conversations have turned around shared poetic enthusiasms, like the writings of George Oppen or Rob Halpern. Something these writers have in common, of course, is their political engagement. But it wasn't until the beginnings of the struggles against austerity throughout the UC that I saw that Jill's political engagement didn't end with the aesthetic. I hope I won't be outing Jill too much or embarrassing her to say that her commitment to practical struggle has been a continuous inspiration to me. That inspiration is part of why I asked Jill to take part in a conference I organized last August under the rubric of the Poetic Labor Project, entitled, quote, Working, Writing, Fighting, unquote. Given 2011's political events worldwide, both abroad in Tunisia, Egypt, and elsewhere, and at home in Wisconsin, I wanted to hear from writers with explicitly political engagements. And Jill's talk did not disappoint. A concise, trenchant critique of the infantilization of political actors under the age of 18, it ventured into a territory normally considered taboo in order to give us a picture of the kinds of things we're going to have to reckon with if we want to think about the politics of the present. Of course, this was all pre-Occupy. And Occupy changed a lot of things and started a lot of new conversations, including now, notoriously, the conversation about violence. One of the reasons this conversation is so persistent is that the word and concept violence are so slippery that opposed sides can both use it while meaning completely different things by it. To navigate this political moment, we need not merely action, but good thinking and writing, which can help us to figure out what to do next. From what I've heard and read, Jill's doing that thinking and writing. I'm grateful to her for it, and envious of you all that you get to hear what she's been working on. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jill Richards.
David Brazil and Christian, thank you. Can you guys hear me? Or I can speak a little louder. More?
No, it's good.
Okay. Okay. Well, at 7 when Ron Silliman's reading, you'll definitely be able to hear. Thanks for that. And also, while I have a microphone and a captive audience, I wanted to remind you that we're on day 2 of the wave of phone calls to the Alameda County DA, Nancy O'Malley, asking that she drop the charges on the Sproul 13. So when I called today, the person taking the messages called me honey, which I thought was not very lawyerly. But this person assured me that they were counting the number of phone calls. The first thing I want to read, I didn't write. It's called Poem, and it is by Wendy Trevino, who's in the back there. So I'll just begin with her poem. Poem. Santander Bank was smashed into. I was getting nowhere with a novel, and suddenly, the reader became the book, and the book was burning. And you said it was reading, but reading hits you on the head. So it was really burning, and the reader was dead, and I was happy for you. And I had been standing there a while when I got your text. Santander Bank was smashed into. There were barricades in London. There were riot girls drinking riot rose. I think it's rosé. Might be a typo. Maybe. The party melted into the riot, melted into the party, like fluid roadblocks and gangs and temporary autonomous zones, and everyone and we all stopped reading. Okay, this next piece is for David's chapbook on violence that Chris mentioned via David. And it's more of an essay. It's called Some More Reflections on Violence. And I think it's coming out on May Day, is my impression. David asked me to write something about violence for a chapbook. This was potentially what violence is, as in this act is violent and this other act is not. But a definition seemed wrong to me, or beside the point. Ornament, too, felt so sadly deflated, entirely on the wrong ship, so to speak. So this is not really a poem and not a manifesto, or not one that makes claims like we want, we need, we are. I'm more interested in the we that sits behind political writing, and also writing about other things, and what this we has to do with violence. Laura said she's tired of talking about it, and I agree. Mostly I'm tired of talking about violence, nonviolence, and associate violence talk with being tired. We are always failing, and failing, until we aren't failing anymore, Francesca said. But not in a sad way, when we were all there, the not men, talking about it. At Wiley Manual on a different day, I remember Zhivka making this gesture with her hand, as though she were throwing away a tiny scrap of paper over and over again. This was probably after, but I remember it as the first or maybe the second meeting of the Marxist Feminist Queers group at Anastasia's house on the floor, when we were watching Oki's favorite clip from La Cérémonie, where Sandrine Bonnier cups an invisible explosion with her fingers like this. She, the character, is feeling for something in the air over and over and making that sound. She was making that sound and feeling for something, not gently as though petting, but as though stabbing or pinching, as though there were a threat there in her hand, but also as something that could not get away. I was thinking about this way of feeling for something over and over, and the conversations that some are tired of now, about violence, nonviolence. There's talk about violence, nonviolence as being or not being the linked arms of standing bodies. There's talk about violence, nonviolence when dumpsters are set on fire. There's talk about violence, nonviolence when batons break the ribs and fingers of protesters. There's talk about violence, nonviolence when police shoot an already handcuffed man. There's talk about violence, nonviolence after anti-police riots. There's talk about violence, nonviolence after the breaking of storefront windows. There's talk about violence, nonviolence when streets are blocked and when protesters are hit by cars. There's talk about violence, nonviolence when persons are raped in the community and what this community is and the people in it. There's talk of violence, nonviolence during the prison hunger strikes and the student hunger strikes and the wildcat strikes. There's not talk or less talk about how none of these things are the same thing. If the sameness of all these things being violent is assumed, why not just say it in this way of everything being the same? To just say the pane of glass is like a head of a person is like a dumpster on fire. Or then if it is a spectrum and one kind of violence is at the bottom, then where is everything else? Is breaking a head more or less violent than breaking a glass window? Is raping a person more or less violent than setting a fire? Does it matter if the fire burns in a dumpster or in a car or in a store or in the 1960s? Is breaking a lid with a baton violent the way that blocking a cord is violent? Is the dragging of cars more or less violent? Is the highway violent, or only the way that it separates neighborhoods and is blocking the highway with bodies more or less violent? Are injunctions violent the way gangs are violent, and which violent is this? Are stay-away orders violent or more or less violent than blocking a bus or blocking a bank? The law that says a woman must listen to the sound of a fetal heart or look at the sonogram before she can have an abortion, is that violent, and in which way? Crimes of hate as more or less violent than non-criminalized hate is violent, and where does it count and not count? Are rubber bullets more or less violent than a crowd is violent, and which violent comes first? Is the violence young persons or old persons or white persons, and how does this affect violence? The student filming everything with his phone from a ledge of the building said that the woman should not be in front with the violence, there should be men there to protect them, and we said, fuck you. Was that violent? Someone said that we must save the students, and someone else that we were all being childish. Is that more or less violent? Is the prison and the university system more or less violent than the linking of arms? Is it not violent, and how many nots? Is saying no more or less violent than saying yes, and how many times can you say yes, where? Which yes, where? Imagine the space where nothing is violent and show me that space. The we that decides what is more or less violent, what is violent, nonviolent. Which we gets to say yes, it is this, but not that. What is left out of that we, and what is still left out of my we, is that violent. What about the night downtown outside the city jail during one of the noise protests? It must have been on the 4th of July because there were so many fireworks. Well, it could have just been our fireworks for the noise and no 4th of July. We were all there with the pots and the pans and the sound system in a cart, the fireworks exploding somewhere a few blocks away and the police looking at us and us looking up. There are no light switches inside holding cells. It is fluorescent all the nighttime there, but the holding cells all the way up were flickering in the dark and the noise. The sheets being held over the windows inside the cells all the way up and then taken off like a Morse code. But no one knows Morse code anymore, so it was just the sound system and the yelling and the fireworks exploding, the sirens and the police lines, and seeing the lighted windows go dark and then light and then dark, on and off the sheets held over, and then held off the windows inside the jail, over and over, on, off, on, while we looked up. The next thing I'm going to read is more like a poem. It's called Emergency with an Open Mouth. It was the most successful spoken line you could live off of, or that was the idea. Being saved in the middle of a tense situation, or the swallowed flashlight flashing, the idea of a tense situation. An emergency with an open mouth, mouthing, the locking mechanism, and the seasons of general preparedness. It was semi-precious and tended to slow down, knees creaking, hinge joint the back and forth, resembling Delaware, box stores and blockish. It was a wheelbarrow and plums, etc., all stalled into Sunday or differently named day. On the way to the freeway, the docks, the day laborers, edgewise, it was a video paused, the time code emotionally charged. To approximate, it was a free hand stroking the free and clear or longish eye contact on public transportation, the thighs touching like a row of hams, the long to short, the geographic regions, the breakfast news, the bedtime news, the family romance, the childhood fantasy, a perpetual phase of spring metaphors that remain extremely calm under the circumstances. By this time next year, it will be exactly the thing I just wanted to say too. It was a loss of function, the alarm, a shorter form of waiting. It was the bridge to the sound of really fast typing, the superlative sounding. And this is the last thing I'm going to read because I don't want to take up too much time. It's called Riot Porn. As a twitching across familiar linked images, concomitant sense of remoteness, generally, the squares, and fantastic collision, some dashing in Bangkok, a trans-animated cow, the lurking beautiful circuits, ends buzzing aloft. The wanting was daily and the story was not. For being a compendium of frothy sounds, the occasion to use the word gaslight, a heroics of discovery, one hot mess, the traffic befaunt. Accounting for variations of longing for elemental fortunes, dislodging a compilation of more generous symptoms that would nod emphatically in a personal conversation, in which you are the flounced bustle of a green island, buttoned heels clicking time, for relatively short duration and duration as a faculty of standing in front of. The hairstyles aboard this vessel and the evening of study, the savageries and volcanic ash, a halo across the continent, appended by grease, meaning fire. Attempts were made to consider the valley directly above the screen, or better, attempts were made towards the specters of a yellow window, glow, a fugitive craft, particulars touching, a rough edge of something knit, sour and sweet, intoning a look of things now peaked to gray. Lining the vessel in tiny knots tied by a sailor's hand, all the fibers are floating, brights and rose and fire, edges prickling, smeared, and invertebrate bent. Breathing, hawk-jawed, the wet flitting insects buzz, subtropic stitching across. The life cycle of an eel between Mumbai and Lisbon in deep blue days, an adolescent, as a prepositional form of intermittent night. The slideshow of shields on a train the color of freight. My curtains caught on misplaced piles of books, the newspapers, flaunting their assorted denouements. The incomplete accidents of fire and water, hesitancies of a marriage plot, my queen's crumpled letter desire, linguistic interiors, a trail of signs, unfurled, into the markets, the face of the crowds, the swarming crowd, a villain, the crowd, the category of villain, the category of city, as laughing in a foreign language, the crowding a hiccup romance, occasion of dastardly, the fuming crowds, petals streaming sailors, crowds, the apostrophe, O Rose, how thou art, the vagabond's inheritance found. When we were young and agile, in an astonishing flood of light, illuminated papers, a vessel of sound. Incantation and the long vowels escape, rock, saw, the pirates standing watch, the currents breaking. Thank you.
A summer in 6 sentences. 10. Life is detail, steep slope. A man sits on the steps, waiting for a bus. All that aside, fog this thick gives one the sense of forever being indoors. Boarding the bus, she tucks half a donut into her purse. This fragment from N.O. of Ron Silliman's multi-volume poem, The Alphabet, opens onto many of the reasons that Ron Silliman's poetry opens onto my life and matters to me. A summer in 6 sentences, 10. 6 sentences slide into 10, or were already 10, as Silliman's sentences characteristically bend in upon themselves, brackets enclosing brackets, tracing the folds of thought, in a way that seems both to be hyper-aware and critical, resistant to the kind of self-congratulatory thought that would label itself as hyper-aware. Life is detail, steep slope. Vivid and various, Silliman's poetry is poetry of everyday life, flashes of detail, a woman tucking half a donut into her purse. But details also attain a steepness as they accumulate, multiply, combine, and contradict. Ron Silliman is the author of hundreds of publications, from books of poetry to criticism to ebooks, memoirs, works in anthologies, periodicals, and a highly popular blog. His 26 books of poetry include Crow, ABC, Paradise, for which he received the Poetry Center Book Award from San Francisco State University, What, and Wharf Hypothesis. Although his poetry fills many books, many of these books are all part of one poem, the life work which Silliman has been writing since 1974, called Kayak. He is the author of the influential collection of critical essays, The New Sentence, and the editor of the anthology In the American Tree. His memoirs include his 2004 work, Under Albany, and the collective, collaborative, The Grand Piano, an experiment in collective autobiography, co-authored over many years in volumes with his co-creators of the language movement, Lynn Hegenian, Ray Armantrout, Steve Benson, Carla Harriman, Tom Mendel, Ted Pearson, Bob Perelman, Kit Robinson, and Bear Watton. Silliman's work has widely translated into 12 languages. He was a 2006 Poet Laureate of the Blogosphere, a 2002 Fellow of the Pennsylvania Arts Council, a 2003 Literary Fellow of the National Endowment for the Arts. In 2010, he received the Levinson Prize from the Poetry Foundation. Poetry both absorbing and absorbed by the physical world, but also with the impossibly multiple directions of thought that cross and crisscross within and through physical details. Silliman's poetics seems beautifully captured by these words, his own words, which appear in parentheses in his poem Skies. Staring at the sun with my eyes shut, a complex web of orange arcs, vibrating, continually changing, impossible to focus on, seems to appear. Please join me in this honor of welcoming Ron Silliman.
It's a pleasure to be here and to see so many old friends, including two other members of the Wheeler Action Steering Committee. In 1970, we ran this building as an anti-war organization. I had a silkscreen studio just around the corner, printing anti-war posters, another home for peace every day. But of course, as a student here, I had to learn form. And the form I really learned is captured on something like this, which is a trading card. Needless to say, it's a sonnet. It's from Revelator. Some of you will recognize the environment this particular poem captures because it's mostly set in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And I suspect all of you know the painting called The Persistence of Memory, even if you don't know its title. It's a painting by Salvador Dali with melting clocks. Drone to the fan in the bathroom, refrigerators rumble, casting ice. Fluorescent bulb shines in the lamp. Damp day fogs the glass. Razor wire rings the rooftop. The young woman rises to shake my hand. The helicopter green just hangs high over the gallery floor. The persistence of memory smaller than I'd imagined. The pinks of the women of Avignon too bright. I hear morning as the first siren trucks cough. I have been working for the past couple of years on a new section of this longer work, which in the new section itself is called Universe. And one section of it will eventually be called Northern Soul, which is a mode or genre of music in England that would be equivalent in the US to Motown. And the first section of that work was published as Wharf Hypothesis, which is what I am going to read. Up Key Street to Deansgate, then over to Victoria Station, Northern Rail west to Liverpool. Gray clouds pillowing the sky, no height in these fields yet, whatever they're growing. hedgerow as fencing. An older station at Newton-le-Willows, brick office padlocked, but the chairs on the platform, bright yellow vinyl, then the backsides of row housing with thin slivers of yards, school fields without baseball diamonds, magpies mistaken for mockingbirds, blood pudding, salad, full of rocket, plane spotter in an anti-aircraft unit learning first to drive a tank over the Egyptian desert, then determining never to leave England again. Sharp shadow over the page, writing into the dark. Notice is hereby given that it is proposed to change the name of Sparrow Park to Gallipoli Garden. Bury in bloom reads the jeep tipped in aforementioned garden. Fly all the way from London, and what's on the screen but cash cab? Squigglies in white paint at each intersection mean don't park here. I'm not listening to their conversation, but rather to the language which I decide must be Greek, understanding not a word. The tall woman is wearing a giant box, plaintively calling your name. The little dog pirouettes just to see me. The market's a national treasure, but it's just off-brand tack in vast quantity. United puts away the arsenal to reach the finals. Canals everywhere. 10% of the people own 90% of the land. Ergo, 90% of the people live on just 10% of the land. The streets thus are crowded in the south. Locals discern a coarse tongue. Whiston Kurnow and Barry Schwabsky in the very same room. Asparagus ravioli, Fleet Street being shorter than I'd imagined, cutting short Artie Gold, vomiting between sets as the turntablist samples Willie the Shake, photo shoot by the Roman fort, speed at which towns blur by, feeling blurby, Simon, Mitt Garfunkel, always with the cooked tomato, my kingdom for a floss. Trees shimmer perfectly still, but upside down, mirrored by the river, no more than a stream. Peat bog and the pine barrens, dogwoods blossoms all but gone. Birds won't fly in a straight line. The tea, being hot, steamed his glasses, which then cleared slowly. The argument over bitterns turned bitter. Poetry has been very, very good to me, who has proven but a meager steward. In the dark, but with the window open, attempting to sort the symphony of birds. Conch shell mounted atop a copper spike. Where I come from, fog never foretells rain, but here it is difficult to discern where one ends, the other congeals into drops. First crow at dawn maketh one to yawn. The small fort stood nearly 2,000 years until amid the hurly-burly of rapid industrial expansion, it was knocked down without a second thought. Four-trilled birdsong, or perhaps a female green-backed heron. The thrill of the first signatures binding, white thread at the margin, is what I first wrote. Wind on the back of my neck, soften the break in the line, not as you hear it, rhetorical, but throated, caught in the business of breathing. A kiss that momentarily proved a bit too intense takes one's, the choice is in fact accurate, breath away, so that it is oxygen or the absence thereof that flushes the rush of adrenaline, illuminating the night. Dickens lives but a block away. As indeed he did. This book has a funny little thing that where the title sits on this band that goes around it, and I just put it back on upside down. And this section of Revelator appeared in the magazine Poetry, where I hold the record for being the person who has gone the longest between appearances. I first appeared in Poetry before I was a student at Berkeley in 1969 and did not appear again for 41 years. But, you know, there is a real value in patience. Words torn, unseen, unseemly seen, some far suburbs mall lot. Summer's theme, this year's humid. To sweat is to know. Pen squeezed too tight yields ink as blood or pus. So the phrase scraped, removed, offending thine eye. Outsource bush, against which insource what? Who will do it? Most terrible predicate, high above mountains, snow-capped, even in August in-flight motion, picture eternal sunshine of the spotless mind, infuriates many. No action, no funny plot, too dense to follow, unless mind's eye gives attention first. Blackbird signals many. Synecdoche. Bumblebee wonders, am I his flower? 1 hour shopping and the vandals fled. Him will know not, never confront. So recall the next day that anger directed at complexity. As we deplaned in Seattle, old battle never won, never gonna. Sit now still beside Dungeness River to spot quail hopping about this untrimmed garden as dog walkers circle back, jet trail and dawn sky, thread cloud wisps, shadows sharp in the mountains. There's 3 dots here. I pause, 2 poems, 3 pages before book's end. First growl of plane's motor, sun higher now contracts shadow, dandelion, froth blows over cut grass, spotted white tops of clover, something deep purple, bell-shaped, nameless, at least to me. I am what I am, chewing endlessly until I realize I'll never swallow whatever. Jay's bark, first fog is deepest when trail ends, at first bend in the river. This in 6 weeks will all be swollen. Salmon, frantic in their competition, men also. On the wire grid door screen, various bugs alight at dawn, drawn by the interior light. Something long with wings, something no more than a speck with legs. I scream, you scream, we all scream for that which is unnameable, unquenchable, inconsolable. Deep in one's chest, surrounding the heart, art is a mode of stalking. Balk at any configuration, at what's inescapably omitted. At Monticello, I very nearly wept to imagine just once the president is the smartest, most questioning, most rigorous of all. No, that's not it either. Seeing hand shielding brow, the trail ahead is empty. The man stops to unleash his dogs. Mist rises from the river. Bland competency distributed equally among hundreds begets only rebellion. What winnowing from the first book to the next, the nest, mountainside garden fountain, yellow legs and killdeer searching the mud for tasties. Who here speaks English? Who here hark loud as grackles, incessant laugh after battle after maths, ironic sum, economy trumps all, history where now teens cluster to mock tourism's earnest gape. It looks so small because it is. Trucks evacuating quarry, beep in reverse. Diners posture alert, awaiting omelet, sausages, toast, behind whom the sun arises. White light or Morningside Heights. Cook hollering to the cashier in Spanish, then English, then a third language I don't understand. Cringe before that glare until muted by cloud wisps. Monastic New York hotel deep within shadows. What music mocks its maker? The ropes tug as dad shakes his beard. Lost daughter found, then sold into marriage. In walks Bert again, crossing into language. Subways, stairs become waterfalls under Ivan until flooding halts commute. What Milton sees the deaf hear or not. Cashews, pretzels, honey roasted sesame sticks. The earth below flat and checkered, not yet autumn, dry desert heat. Heart races, arts phases, hard faces heard in place in pink marble plaza beyond which red dirt surface of Mars is not more barren. Or You are being driven along an unfamiliar route through streets of your own former home, whole neighborhoods tinged with emotion. One still dreams of jets sliding into houses, apartment complexes gone. 1 millisecond of stillness, then the heat and burst, an orange ball of flame explodes in the mind's eye. Anxious in your hotel room's great raft of a bed, for days the networks discover new amateur videos, waves far greater than one can imagine. On the beach, bathers not even thinking to run. Buses floating through streets of debris. Banda Aceh, this week's geography of the public imagination. Phuket's stream of tourists washed away. Bulldozers scooping corpses. Our newscaster alone in an empty village. Only the battered mosque remains. Where are the people? How does this outer life, apocalypse reported, penetrate my dreams? 3 men on the street walking, discussing who will reach 60 when the way as teens we spoke of 20, not even seeing the homeless woman asleep beneath the newspaper racks at Mission and 4th. 5th of Bourbon warns, passed between 3 beneath the bridge. Day is done, day is the ever-present challenge, wake or not. The painter Jess simply stays asleep. Paint hardens, even cracks or decades. Browns grow muddy, green's mute, sky goes pale. In the midst of an abstract field blue, deep blue squiggles, Don Quixote approaches. What is possible? Seen, heard, emotive prosody, heart because it impacts one's breathing, gasp to grasp the truth of what is not even visible, cannot be heard. Red-haired setter, deaf to the world, lopes slowly, copes by smell, residual sight, my eyes shut. Dear Krishna, it's 6:11 a.m. Upstairs, a faucet turns briefly. Lily is grown now. Alan's hair thins at last. Melissa's perfect smile still shines, but no sign of Lulu. Time erodes what's dear, what's near, is passed too soon to grasp fully the consequence. Dawn threatens a new day constantly. Sun as vicious as dusk, or rather simply uncaring. Birds disinterested in the infant's corpse. It's language that introduces emotion, or the other way round. My old street so narrow, 2 boys throwing a football would find my world unimaginable, and I'm sure theirs likewise will amaze them. How quaint that first home network seems already. Norma says of Barbara, she's there and then not, mimicking conscious more slowly now, so that others can see you feel the heat's lack, but not the wind. Wind up an old clock. Airplane, I realize, is now tracking the traffic, the early commute, first train, best train. Still, no hint of sun, but now all the trees, houses, visible in silhouette. The dog, audible by its collar, paws over hardwood, then a sigh. Across the street, windows emerge, porches, no longer just outlines, details, a larger jet now, a few cars, then many. My penmanship more ornate today, no sign of the trembles. An instant ago, I sat in Eliot's kitchen, then taped words cut from the paper above the dog's white bowl. Good dog, the last I'd ever live with, I didn't know then. I dream you, floating, not plummeting from high off that bridge. Birds finally begin to twitter, color floods emerging day. The sun still behind the hills, face west toward whichever future comes. Mockingbird mimics dog collar, another bird's 3-note peep. Discern now which jet is which. Pinks streak the high sky. I rise, eyes blink, shaking sleep away. 7:57 angles in fog. Bay at the runway's rim, engines raring, waiting, ready, poised, then flaring to race forward, up over the salt ponds, half hidden in the mist. Silhouette of the city-piercing cloud, but the bridges are hidden. Inner ear, particular trumpet displays Pressure, cottony wisps soon scatter. Valleys revealed, green and gold. I hold the fluted glass to cleanse the palate. Mango ice cream or the sauce, hot and sweet, spicy, smoked eggplant. Rice absorbs the broth. Bread ahead, too big for hats. Hands likewise, large, grasp the ball with ease. To please herself, she walks on her palms, then flips upright, smiling, sees more than we know, teases younger brother, mother, dad. Bad dogs? Never. Stone said to contain its own sculpture thwarts choice. To voice vowels languidly, moist lips purse their part. There's an art to it, intuited before thought thinks. Paused at an intersection not visible from here, the blue of a perfect spring morning unimaginable above this gray crush of apartments. Who here owns the slightest yard? Young man alone in Chipotle, chewing thoughtfully his large burrito, not talking, taking it all in, eyes absorbing all. Could have been, had this taqueria been there then, myself in 1964. What little I knew then but could learn by doing, earn just enough to eke by, barking for the cafe wa, dime for each new customer. I lacked the huckster's flair, lone feather by a gravel road, all one needs by which to fabricate the tale, each to each, not beach exactly, but stones against the water piled up to the dock beyond which mockingbird hops to confront a robin, squirrel rears up to eat some morsel in the clover. Each page would blow wild, but for the binding stitched deep into the notebook's spine. How many words have I left? Use them wisely, sparingly. Each could outlast me. To what purpose but this compulsive record? Forward from the age of a small mid-century lad, sitting cross-legged on my bed, scribbling anything to be free, anything to make sense. Peel cellophane from a new tea carton. No indication where it's grown. Argentina. No record, no sense of that map. Haywood called his first book Cartographers. Was there ever a second? A sense now, over half a century intricate puzzle. Grandmother reduced to ash. Grandfather no more silent than ever just for being dead. Sip today's first tea. The warmth is the half of it. My throat first craves. Table narrow in the kitchen alcove. West Virginia A-frame cabin clock with a different bird song for every hour. Sans kids, what have you to etch these words into time? Applause once we cross the border. My 47th state, family myths arc over generations. John Franklin Tansley could not have known, telling any who would listen, that yes, the explorer, yes, his own grandfather, yes, but the grandson Richard goes back a century later, looks up, finds the marriage record. Yes, John Franklin, yes, married Jane, but instead a fishmonger married a weaver's daughter. X marks the signature. How soon technology catches you out. These keys enact a surveillance that will only sink deeper over time. What you think about that, from comma to coma to commerce to con versus subjugation. The root marks the language's route across form. Surname in the family now just 4 generations, but literacy not more than 6. So what arrogance am I then enacting, weaving ink into paper, stains of history already blanching in the light up above? I hear you stirring, rising, at least to sit up, then slowly, quietly coming downstairs to use the bathroom. Dawn just starts to be visible through the blinds. Soft glow, neither blue nor green. Sun not yet visible. They're distinct, sun and the dawn. One recurs while the other stretches. Fans swirl slowly high overhead, but the wind chime is still. Why repair rotting kitchen now? Why seek, read every book if the flood won't quit even when you've left? Desire. Desire is the answer. Hunger never rests. Geese each dawn, now for decades, circling lake until day's form is found all over again. I rise to write, sun still hidden behind hills. Hummingbirds upon branch appears so still, deep breath to taste air. First Bart, first bark. Squirrel's tail twitches, causing whole branch to shake. Trains whistle deep and steady. 3 echoes distinct. Great shushing rush of traffic. White noise forms morning music outside window. Spider quick on his thread. It's all about scale. Bicycles brake squeal. Long way down. Stands on her deck naked to inspect the day. Trumpet flower. Pod yellow. Almost purple tip. Phallic before it explodes, red, orange, bright yellow center, notebook pages dwindle, one project I'll not complete. That's not its point, but to stretch even just a little, shape and dimension, time and dominion. Day's echoes ricochet uphill, canyon to canyon. Every fold, marvelous instrument, my declining ear hears what I cannot see, say, sheer ecstasy of breath. Each day, no two alike ever, audible in head's bell, sinus sounds, own teeth grinding until jaws, muscles spasm, clench. Dear Los Angeles Dodgers, my bête noire knot, you form the surrogate we so desperately need. Enemy, enema, it all comes out in the wash. One road south of Dogtown, garden fenced to ward off deer, plums, their skin tart, their flesh sweet and cool. I almost don't recognize the hummingbird still on the almond branch. Farms here feel vast. We missed a single turn. Bob speaks of how O becomes D or vice versa. Steve talks happily of new sun. David and I and ours eat around a front yard table just behind a small picket fence. The heat rare even here. You never see birds sleep. Hummingbirds, red crown, white chest, a view of the bay from the deck. Audible neighbors, not really visible. Someone's alarm reaches endless reiteration. Arise, arise. Your eyes must be clear. The sound of Bart different from day of my youth. Thin haze but no fog. Light spreads over San Francisco. Clouds at first seem small until one speck of plane flies underneath. Then a second absolutely crosswise. Big truck's sticker reads, give war a chance, look for the gun rack. Boat sits still in bay. Who works there in silence? Only because I'm too far to hear. Notebook reaches limit, not unlike mind or heart. Whole families singing Beatles songs as we drive. First thought, not your own, let alone best. Phrases weave against lines. Water comes to a boil. Squirrels wrestle with the branches. One skitters across slanted roof. Mount Tam, silent as ever, only seems unchanging human scale. Clouds above have moved on, leaving new sky, sun muted still amid trees. I close my eyes just to listen. Laughing jay, distant train. Feel instead air over hair, back of my hand. Its taste palpable in nostrils. Eucalyptus, tea. Hummingbird responds to jay. Jets echo heading east. Sounds create. First sprinkler, bottle on table. Sense of my own body, high in the Berkeley hills. Thank you very much.
Thank you, poets. Thank you, Ron Silliman. Thank you, Jill Richards. Thank you, Chris Chen. Thank you, Claire Marie Stanachek. Thank you, audience, it's been a really good year for poetry in this room. Thank you very much. Stay, talk to the poets, buy a book, come back in the fall. You're welcome.